On behalf of your co-host, the Olathe and Lenexa Chambers of Commerce, welcome back for our final forum featuring House District 14. Again, I'm Scott Cope of Enterprise Bank and Trust, and as a member of the Olathe Chambers Board Executive Committee, it's my honor to be serving as a moderator. For those of you who may not have attended the earlier forums, our format today includes a 3-minute opening statement by each candidate, a moderated question and answer period during which candidates each have 1.5 minutes to respond, followed at the end by a 2-minute closing statement. Speaking order has been randomly determined with the candidates and will rotate throughout the program. Please take a moment to make sure your cell phones are silenced, and we'll get started. First, I'll introduce the candidates of House District 14, presented in alphabetical order by party. This district includes parts of North Central Olathe and South Central Lenexa. Starting with the Republican primary race. Charlotte Esau. Republican primary candidate, has been a political volunteer and advocate for many years, and she enjoys being active in her church. She and her husband have 5 grown children and live in Olathe. She serves on the Commission on Aging, volunteers with the Olathe Public Library, and has been a volunteer counselor with the Leleche League, an organization assisting young mothers. Tom Stanyon. Republican primary candidate, grew up in Pratt, Kansas, before graduating from KU. He served as a naval officer during the Vietnam War before returning to Kansas, where he spent most of his career in the electrical business. He has served on a school board and city planning commission, as well as been involved in various civic and business organizations. Tom has 3 grown children and lives in Lenexa. Aaron Young. Republican primary candidate, was raised in Leavenworth County, graduated from Washington University in St. Louis, and after a career as a civil engineer in the construction industry, in 2012 went back to school at UMKC School of Law to earn his degree. He and his wife have 2 children and live in Lenexa. Moving to the general election Democratic candidate. Angela Schweller. Democratic general election candidate, grew up in Johnson County, attending public schools here before graduating from KU. She is currently a small business owner and a realtor with Keller Williams and enjoys being involved in the community. Angela lives in Olathe with her husband and 2 children. We will now move to the opening statements by each candidate. Candidates, as a reminder, you have 3 minutes each to present your opening statement. We will go in order that you've chosen randomly to begin, from my left to my right, starting with Charlotte.
Thank you to the Olathe and Lenexa Chambers for providing this opportunity for you to learn about the candidates and where they stand on the issues that matter to you. My name, as they said, is Charlotte Esau, and I am seeking your support to be your next state representative in Topeka. My husband Keith and I have been residents here for over 30 years. We moved here as a young family, raised our 5 children here, and we're now enjoying 4 young grandchildren. We came seeking economic opportunity, built our home near my husband's place of employment, and have stayed because we've put down deep roots within the community. I want to see this district continue to both thrive and be a place that new young families can move into as we did. That can only happen if we have an economic climate that fosters growth in jobs and a tax policy that doesn't take more and more of the family budget. For the last decade, I've served on the Commission on Aging, and as I've been talking with many seniors in their homes, they tell me that we need to ensure that we're not overburdening our seniors who typically live on fixed incomes so they can continue to afford to live here as well. A community that has families of all generations who choose to stay here for decades is one that will be stable and healthy in both economic and social terms. I will strive to be a voice for the taxpayers in Topeka, ensuring that our state government spends your money the same way you would if you were there budgeting yourself. Thank you for taking the time to be an involved citizen by being here and by listening to this video online.
Candidate 2, Aaron.
Thank you to the Lenexa and Olathe Chambers of Commerce for organizing the event, for the opportunity to speak to everyone here and everyone that watches online. My name is Aaron Young. I'm a candidate for representative in House District 14. I've found that in a lot of these events, the format follows sort of a who am I, why am I here pattern. So you know who I am. I'm here because I have kids in Kansas public schools. I'm here because my wife works in healthcare in Kansas. I'm here because I pay taxes on a house and on vehicles and on clothes and groceries for a preteen boy and an 8-year-old girl in Kansas. My family and families like mine live the reality of these policies and the decisions that are made in Topeka every single day. Those policies in the last 10 years have driven government spending to unsustainable levels. They've taken money out of the classrooms and put it into the courtrooms. They've created instability in both the public and private sectors that discourages investment in Kansas by private companies. They've created and funded inefficient and ineffective programs. I'm here because Kansas can do better. I'm here because Kansas has to do better. And I'm here because my family and because your families all deserve for Kansas to do better.
Candidate 3, Tom.
Hi, glad to see all of you here, and I'm happy to be here. Like most politicians, I'm thrilled whenever anybody wants to hear the sound of my voice. So thank you all for coming. The first thing that people typically ask me is why I wanted to run for this office. And if I had to give you one word answer, it would be, well, I guess it's 2 words, Sam Brownback. During the policies that were carried out during his administration, I thought were very detrimental to the state. I didn't want to see them carried on. He's gone, but there are still a lot of people who want to revert back to that lifestyle or that way to run the state, and I don't want to see that happen. I could be just taking the easy life. I retired recently, and my friends say, gee, you must be crazy. And when I'm out going door to door in this heat, I think maybe they're right. Maybe I am crazy. But going door to door is what I decided I wanted to do to try to learn more about the district, more about what they thought, and of course give them a chance to learn a little bit about me. And you get a real education out there. I've probably knocked on 2,000 doors in the last 3 months. I started at the end of April, talked to several hundred people, petted at least that many dogs. I haven't kissed any babies yet, but I'm sure that's coming up. You learn some interesting things. One lady, when I was at the door, she looked at my brochure. You know, they can do great things with your pictures in those brochures. So she looks at my brochure and she looks at me. She looked at the brochure and then she looked at me. She looked at me again and she said, well, I guess that's you. It's a shame you don't look more like your picture. Well, I said, I think so too. I'm sorry I don't. But I can't do every day what the photographers can do for you. At any rate, the thing that surprised me most in going door to door and getting feedback from the people in the district, the number one issue is, why can't we all get along? They don't like the idea that in Topeka, and I suppose it comes down from Washington, there's all this rancor and all this, I'm on this side, you're on this side, we're not going to talk. They want to know why we can't get together, come up with the best policies for the state, and run the state in an efficient manner, and get on down with business. And I think that's a good thing. They're worried about education, lots of other issues, but they seem to think if we just had a better, more organized, or a better, more cohesive, I'll get the word right here in a minute, state government, we'd all be better off and we'd get more done. So that's my goal, to see if we can reach that area.
Candidate 4, Angela.
Hi, I'm Angela Justice Schweller, and as a member of the Olathe Chamber, I'm excited to be participating in this forum that they've put together with the Lenexa Chamber. So thank you guys for doing that, and for everybody coming out today, and for everyone who is watching on video. So I'm a 5th-generation Kansan, and as mentioned before, I grew up in Johnson County, attending the public schools in Shawnee Mission, went on and got my degree from the University of Kansas, and for the past 12 to 13 years, I've been a small business owner and a realtor in the Kansas City area, representing families that want to move here and live here. I'm now with my husband JT raising my 2 kids here in the Olathe Public Schools, and I want to make sure that they have a bright future and that they also want to follow the pattern of raising their families and starting their careers here in the future. I'm running because through my engagement in the community, I realized that my current legislators weren't necessarily representing who I am or the people that I see around me. I felt unheard and often dismissed, and I feel like a legislator should be a working partner with the community members And in order to do that, they have to hear them. I believe that people that are best represented are heard, and that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to listen. So thank you so much, and I look forward to answering the questions today.
We'll now move on to the moderated question and answer section of the forum. Candidates, you'll each have a minute and a half to respond, and the speaking order will rotate with each question. The first question will go in this order: Candidate 2, Candidate 3, Candidate 4, and Candidate 1. The first question: what are your views on state tax policy? Candidate 2.
My views are...
Excuse me, Candidate 2.
I'm not candidate 2?
Aaron.
I think there's been an error in the seating order when we drew Mr. Stanion was candidate 2 and I was candidate 3, but we can...
We'll make it work.
Okay, so...
I'll make sure. Yep, you're Candidate 2.
Very good. State tax policy, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
What are your views on state tax policy?
Before I discuss tax specifically, I want to make it very, very clear. The state of Kansas has a spending problem. Facts will back up the statement that states that spend less tax less. That math is pretty straightforward and pretty clear. So before we do anything with taxes, the first thing we have to do is get spending under control. But that aside, discussing specific tax policy, we need to do something with how we develop property taxes. Commercial properties need to have fairly valued assessments on property taxes. I agree with an earlier statement that we need to begin assessing sales tax on out-of-state online purchases, because that's not doing that drives away some of our in-state retailers. We need to lower the sales tax on necessities. You can make that up by possibly increasing tax on higher valued items in a sliding scale. But more than anything, more than any permanent changes to tax policy, we need to get spending under control.
Okay. Candidate 3, Tom.
That's me now?
It's you now, yep.
Okay. Well, I think the policy we have now is really pretty good. Like I say, I've gone door to door for a couple of months and talked to hundreds of people, and all of them don't like the tax policy. So I figure if everybody's unhappy, it must be a pretty favorable system. You know, tax reform is always, I pay less and you pay more. The system we have now appears to be raising enough income. I think we do need to reduce the sales tax on food and probably some other necessities as well. Sales tax is very regressive, and it's particularly regressive if it's on food. But other than that, I think we're on the right track. We seem to be raising enough revenue. We're starting to get the state back in better fiscal condition. I think we should just maintain the course we have now.
Candidate 4.
So I would somewhat agree with that. What you just said, Tom, is that we do seem to be headed in the right direction. Our revenue is up and exceeding what was estimated to be true of right now. But I will say that over the past several years, our state policy has become out of balance and a little bit regressive. The recent decreases to our income tax forced both the state and local governments to increase their sales and property taxes to cover just basic needs. We have one of the highest food sales tax in the country, and that hurts our working families. As a state, we need to get our three legs of the stool back in balance. And I would also challenge the spending sentiment that was just expressed, because I feel like we've gotten very efficient in our spending, and I think it could be misleading to some to act like our state is out of control in their spending. It's definitely a balance that you have to find, and you want to be smart in it. But I think over the last several years, we've gotten very efficient in several areas of spending.
Candidate 1.
We need a tax policy that's fair to all, that doesn't punish the working class, that doesn't punish the middle class. But we also, as some have said, need to focus on spending. One of the things the legislature did a couple years ago was fund an efficiency study that, if I had brought the whole thing, it's almost 300 pages. Not very much of it's been implemented. Some of it was good ideas, some of it perhaps wasn't. But instead of spending money on study after study, what we need to do is say, hey, we need to watch what we're spending, not spend money on things that the private sector can do out there, find ways to be more efficient. It can be done without having to study it all first, and then we can focus on other things we need to make with tax changes. Now, one of the things that I have discussed with a number of people, especially at their doors, is how we're doing property tax assessments. And right now, our property values keep going up and up, and I don't know about you, but I don't automatically get an income increase just because, oh, it's a new year, we get more money. It doesn't work that way, and yet government seems to say, okay, your property value went up, so we'll tax you a little more, we'll tax you a little more, we'll tax you a little more. Pretty soon, I can't afford to live in the house that I'm living in right now because my taxes have gotten out of control. So we definitely need to look at that.
Question number 2. We'll go in this order. Candidate 3, Tom. Candidate 4, Candidate 1, and Candidate 2. Here's the question. With record low unemployment rates challenging businesses' ability to find enough employees, what would you do to grow and develop the state's workforce? Candidate 3.
I think the key, my career was in the electrical business, electrical industry, I should say, and I spent a lot of time dealing with manufacturing companies, and I saw over and over and over, the problem isn't so much getting enough employees as it is getting employees who have the skills that they need. I think we need to do a lot more in the area of vocational and technical education. We've got to have a workforce that can fill the needs of the manufacturing industries we have now. We don't have that presently, but we could have if we work at it. And once we develop that, then we'll be able to entice other companies to come into Kansas and build our economic, our industrial, our manufacturing base. But it's got to start with the right education. We've got to have a well-educated workforce. It's not so much numbers as it is what those numbers can do, how skilled they are.
Candidate 4.
So if we want to see economic growth, then that's directly related to population growth. As a realtor in the area, I keep up with market trends, and right now the trend is people are leaving Kansas. So I would ask the question, why are people leaving Kansas, and why aren't we attracting more people, well-educated, good workers to Kansas? I believe some of the key issues that contribute to this are the fact that we've created a perception that we don't value our public education. And that's key to what the foundation of our communities are around here. I find often that people move across the state line because they value our public education systems, and we want to keep up that perception with people. The other issue, I think, is that we are starting to become viewed as a discriminatory state. We've got to get out of this litigation. Oh, sorry, I'm just messing up. We need to reverse some laws that have recently been placed, like the Adoption Protection Act, which is essentially a state-sponsored discrimination law. States like California have ruled that they are not going to spend money in our state anymore because of our views of being anti-LGBT. So I think we need to address that as well.
Candidate 1.
People move here primarily for economic opportunity. I remember as a child, my family moved a lot for my father's job. That just happened to be the type of job that he had, that to move up within the company, he had to move. And every time we moved, we looked for a place that had affordable housing, that was a safe community, and was a short, reasonable commute to work. But it all focused on the fact that it was an economic opportunity, and that's why we were there. We didn't move because, oh, we heard there was a great school in this town. We didn't move because we liked the programs that they happened to have within the community. We moved because of economic opportunity. And that was almost to, I think, maybe one move that we didn't move because of that. So I know that's what other people are also looking at as they're moving into the community. But this is all impacted by taxes, because if our taxes continue to go up, someone's going to say, well, I'm not going to live on the Kansas side, I'm going to live on the Missouri side. Or I'm not going to move to Kansas, I'm going to move to Wyoming where there's no income tax. So we have to keep how taxes are impacting us in mind as we're looking at this. And we have a great workforce here in Kansas. We just need to make sure our tax policy is reasonable as well.
Candidate 2.
The question mentioned specifically unemployment in Kansas. Right now, there are at least 50,000 unfilled skilled trade positions in the state of Kansas. Those are open jobs that just need someone to fill them. Yet, year after year after year, we perpetuate this idea that the only way, in our schools, the only way to be successful and have a long-term career is to go get a bachelor's degree and go into debilitating debt. We've got to change that dialogue. We've got to get to a point where we can remove the stigma on the skilled trades, and as a state and a public education system, begin to develop partnerships with those people, because there are plenty of avenues through certification programs, skilled trade apprenticeships, that can lead to very long, very productive, very successful careers. And that's just, we've got to get to a point where we quit pushing this idea that you've got to go deep in debt before you can have a meaningful career. 50,000 jobs sit out there waiting for somebody to fill them. And it would be really easy to get those filled.
We'll now move on to question number 3. The order for question 3 will be candidate 4, candidate 1, candidate 2, and then candidate 3. Question. Topeka as a whole appears poised to refocus on the state's infrastructure. What would your priorities be in any new statewide transportation plan?
So in the recent years, our transportation department has had sweeping of the funds out of it. So I think number one thing would be to prioritize the replenishing of those funds. At the current spending levels, we are not even meeting basic needs, which is going to cost us many times over in the future cost and repairs and replacements. And as well, we need to keep in mind what it's costing just our regular individual drivers on the road. I know, for instance, myself, driving down 435 about a year ago, I ran over some sort of debris and cost myself $1,200 in damage. So we need to make sure that we're not causing things like that to individuals, because they're going to end up paying a lot more. Then, yeah, I think that covers it. Thanks.
Candidate number 1.
Over the last year, I've had the opportunity to travel all over Kansas, and we have some really good roads in Kansas. If you don't believe me, visit another state. But at the same time, we have roads that need some help. They need improvement, they need maintenance, and they're kind of hurting. And then suddenly you'll be at a place where they obviously built the road hoping the traffic would come. And you think, why is this 4-lane? There's nobody here, there's no traffic. We've got to get smarter about some of that and plan it a little more spread out. If we're going to improve roads, let's at least make sure that some of the back roads that are still state highways are also being improved so that they're safe. But when you look at what's right here in our district, I don't know about you, but I don't think I've driven on 435 and I-35 when it wasn't under construction at least 6 months out of the year. Seems like we've never gotten it done. We've got to do some better planning so that we can look a little bit longer ahead and perhaps go maybe a whole year without reconstructing one of our highways that we drive on a regular basis. And we need to be smart about how we fund it and keep it within reason within our budget.
Candidate number 2.
There's been some discussion in earlier forums about what brings businesses to the state of Kansas, and education has been a topic and lifestyle has been a topic. But when you look at the state of Kansas, and in particular the Kansas City metropolitan area, one of the things that we have as a geographic advantage is our central location. We are a prime location to be a hub of distribution for lots of commercial businesses. And transportation is critical to that. We can't give away transportation funds. We've got to begin to protect, we've got to do a better job of protecting the funds that are already dedicated to infrastructure maintenance in the first place. And as we improve the infrastructure, we need to begin to take advantage of, as a state, public and private partnerships. Design-build agreements have been shown in other areas to provide significant efficiencies over the typical design-bid-build process. But we really need to maintain that focus of, if we want to draw businesses to this area, we need to focus on what makes us special, which is our ability to be a distribution hub.
Candidate 3.
I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I agree with pretty much what the 3 other candidates have said. We are definitely centrally located. We are ideally suited to be a distribution hub. We need good roads to be able to do that. We've got pretty good roads now, but we've got good roads because we've invested money in them through the years. We can't let that up. We've got to repay the money we've taken from the transportation fund, the highway fund, and use it for other things, and get that money being used to keep our roads in Class A condition.
Now we'll move on to question number 4. The order will be candidate 1, candidate 2, candidate 3, and then candidate 4. The question: what are your views on funding K-12 education? Candidate 1.
It's time to stop the endless lawsuits that have basically been lifelong career income for a number of lawyers in our state. Our focus needs to be on the children. What children need to learn has changed over the years, but children themselves have not changed. What they need are loving, engaged teachers that are well paid. We need to make sure that the money is getting into the classrooms, that we're giving them the essential tools that they need to be able to teach the kids. And when we have issues over how it's being spent, we need to be taking those to our local school boards. They're the ones that make the decision on, is the money going to be spent here or is it going to be spent there? And if we aren't happy about it, we need to be showing up at those school board meetings, talking to the school board members, running for school board. It's not an exciting job, but it's clearly a needed job. We also need to show up at the budget meetings and tell them, you know, I want more money spent here and not more money spent there, because it's really a matter of how we're allocating the money more than anything else.
Candidate 2.
Having studied constitutional jurisprudence in my study of the law, I can tell you that in my opinion, the Kansas Supreme Court is very far outside their lane in what they've done in terms of not necessarily establishing equity, but in the debate over adequacy. That cycle has to stop. The answer isn't necessarily more money. We need to take a hard look at where that money is being spent. Of every dollar the state of Kansas spends on education, only 50 cents of it actually goes into the classroom. Only 50 cents of every dollar actually gets spent directly on instructional practices. In the last 8 years, the student population in Kansas has grown 10%. The teacher population has grown 15%. The administrative population in Kansas has grown 35%. The non-teacher, non-administrative employee size has grown 40%. We're spending money on education in Kansas in all the wrong places. And we need to do everything we possibly can to get more than 50 cents of that dollar back into the classroom.
Candidate number 3.
We need to increase our funding of schools. Whether it's the Supreme Court's doing the right job or not doesn't really make any difference. It's what the Constitution says they have to do. They're doing their job. If we don't like it, we need to change the Constitution. But I'm not saying that's what we ought to do, but that's the only way to change the system we have now. We need to fund our schools. That's the legislature's job. How the money is spent is up to each local school board. I don't think we want to change that system. We don't want somebody in Topeka telling a local school board in Olathe and also a local school board in maybe Oberlin, here's what you got to do, because the solution may be totally different for each one of them. We need to leave how the money is spent at the local level. It's up to the state to determine how to get the money to them and the level of the levels of monies that are available for them.
Candidate 4.
So, as mentioned, it's in our state constitution that we fund our public education adequately and equitably. And we elect state school boards and local school boards to help set the standards for what we want to see in our education. And in order to get there, there needs to be a certain amount of funding level. Our courts have ruled that the funding level is unconstitutional and that our legislators are not doing their job. And it's time that they do their job and fund it appropriately. I also want to get out of this litigation. I think it's a waste of our tax dollars. And for whatever reason, certain legislators have just refused to do it. I think we're very close, and I think we can get there. But it's important to realize that also that we have had several studies done to see what is needed in our education system, and that it has been ruled that we are super efficient. In fact, they said 96% efficient in where our spending in our schools are, and that the only thing that would increase to get to the standards we want would be more funding. There was a point that you had made I wanted to touch on. The percentage of growth in classroom, teachers and students versus administrators. I think that when you quote it in percentages, it can be misleading, just because when you compare the two, the in-classroom instruction levels and numbers are already so high, so percentage growth wouldn't be an accurate representation when you compare administrative growth versus instruction growth. So I hope that makes sense.
We'll now move on to question number 5. The order will be as follows: Candidate 2, Candidate 3, Candidate 4, and then Candidate 1. The question has 2 parts. Describe what you see as the Kansas advantage when it comes to economic development and tourism, and the types of economic development policies that you would support to encourage job growth and business expansion in Kansas. Candidate 2.
As I mentioned previously, I think the Kansas advantage, the thing that's unique to Kansas in terms of economic development, is our central location. I can drive to the airport here and I can be on either coast in 3.5 hours. Our ability to act as a distribution hub is almost unequaled in the country. In terms of what policies we could take advantage of to draw businesses and promote economic development, we've got to promote fair valuation of commercial properties. Right now, the same building, if it houses a Target store, is valued differently than if that same building sat empty or housed a Kmart, which isn't fair. That's not equitable, and that doesn't promote stability. Valuation should be based on the property and not based on the material inside the property. We need to work to improve our labor workforce. Some of the things in terms of partnering with the skilled trades and certification programs would be helpful in that. We need to improve the cost of our healthcare program so that cost goes down for businesses in terms of opening healthcare markets. Removing regulations that create barriers between doctors and patients. These are all things that we can do to draw businesses in the state of Kansas.
Candidate 3.
I think we need to take advantage of our central location. That's been mentioned many times by all 4 of us candidates, but it is a very valid point. I think the thing, and I've mentioned this before, is we need to have the workforce that people need. That means having the technical and vocational skills that employers, nothing in the world is getting simpler, it's all getting more complicated. We need higher skilled workforce. If we've got the people, they'll come, they'll take advantage of our central location. We have a very attractive cost of living compared to either coast. That's to our advantage. We need to ballyhoo that up. And I think if we do that, we'll be doing just fine.
Candidate 4.
So I had not said anything about our central location, but thank you for that credit, because I do believe that's an asset. I also think that Kansans are awesome. We are friendly, we're fun, and it's a great place to live. So I think that that's our attraction. And encouraging job growth with that, we need to make sure that we're just being innovative in our technology, that we are protecting our small businesses and partnering with them and encouraging them by doing things like protecting net neutrality. And we need to make sure that we're investing in our digital infrastructure, which is super important for the future.
Candidate 1.
We have safe, family-friendly communities. We have a growing economy. We have wide open spaces. We are centrally located. We have a work ethic that says, let's get it done, whatever it takes at the lowest cost we can possibly do. All of these are things that we need to market to companies that are looking to come here. But at the same time, we also need to not necessarily be playing favorites between, well, we'll pick this company over that company, but with our tax policy, it needs to be something that is fair and accessible for all companies to be able to participate in. We also need to look at lower regulations on businesses because many a times we have regulations and policies that keep businesses from wanting to come here because it will take so much effort for them to meet the standards that we say, well, you've got to jump through this hoop and that hoop. And so that's something else that we possibly need to look at. And we need to make sure that we're encouraging our kids to look at technical opportunities to get technical education because not everything requires a college degree and traditional four-year school. Perhaps I can go 2 years to welding school or whatever it takes to get it done, and I may make a whole lot more money that way. And we need a lot of welders, so that's the kind of thing that we need to be looking at too as well.
We'll now start with question number 6. The order is candidate 3, candidate 4, candidate 1, candidate 2. The question: what is the most important thing that distinguishes you from your opponents in this race? Candidate 3.
Well, I can tell you it's not stature. I think it distinguishes me is I've spent my career in management and in sales. I've worked with a lot of big customers. When I was in sales, one of my biggest accounts was the Ford plant in Clay Como. Big, complex organization, a lot of moving parts, trying to make things happen. We were an integral part of what they did, and that's just one of many that I worked with, but it was happened to be the biggest. And so it takes some time and effort to figure out what needs to be done and then what the parts are to be involved with it. You got different parts of the organization, you got to get everybody together and get them on the same page. And I think government and politics aren't much different. We got the left, we got the right, we got the center. We all have different ideas. We got to come up with a way to make it all work. I spent a lot of time doing that. I don't view it as being a whole lot different being in Topeka than when being up in the Ford plant in Clay Como. Hopefully it won't be as hot as that plant in Clay Como was. Oh, hot place. Anyway, so that's my goal, to get the left and the right together with the center, and let's make things happen and start moving forward instead of just bickering and moving backwards.
Candidate 4.
So I think that our legislature needs to be a little bit more diverse and have new ideas and have people that have a vested interest in the success of our state. One of the reasons I'm running is because I want to help. One of the reasons I'm running is because I grew up in Johnson County. I live here now. I'm raising my kids here, and I want to make sure that that tradition carries on. I'm a realtor, a working mom, and I think that we need that kind of representation up in Topeka. As a realtor, I've proven that I can work with all types of personality types and opposing sides in order to come together and collaborate and get the deal done. In Topeka, there is a lot of divisiveness that Tom has mentioned, and we need people that can communicate and listen to the other side and come together and get the deal done. And I feel like I can get that done. Thanks.
Candidate 1.
I know this district from the lowest income areas to the highest income. I've been watching it grow and change for the last 30 years. And I've worked with young mothers as they've been getting their families off to a start. I've listened to their struggles. I've also been listening to the seniors and how they're having challenges of staying in their homes and staying involved in their communities. Those are all assets that I bring to this position, but most importantly, the unique thing about me is that I've been watching the legislature for more than a dozen years, first as a volunteer and now as a spouse. I know what goes on behind the scenes. I know the kinds of pressure that happens at the last few days of the session. Let's just vote for this and get out of here. Well, compromise on this, and then maybe you'll get that. And so I'm not going to walk into it green. I'm going to know the kinds of inside things that are going on that most people don't see. And that should help me to be able to work with other people to not be quite such, I'm trying to think of the right word that sounds flattering, but when you walk in there and you just don't know, it can be quite a surprise to people to realize what they're facing and how legislation actually does get done, and I will walk in knowing how to make it happen.
Candidate 2.
With all due respect to Angela, I'm going to focus my differentiation on the two other Republican candidates. I'm educated in the law. I've got a very intimate understanding of the Constitution, the role of legislature, I've got a very, very distinct picture of how this whole process is supposed to work. And that's a lot of what put me here today and drove me to file for election, is that what I was seeing happening was not what was supposed to happen. But that's not the biggest distinction, the most important thing about me. As I mentioned in my opening statement, I've got a stake, a unique stake in what happens in Topeka because of my children in public schools and my spouse that works in healthcare and I mean my future, and it's hopefully a long and prosperous future. My entire future sits right here in Kansas, in District 14. I've got skin in the game. Every decision I make will affect my wife and my children and my family.
We will now move on to the closing statements by each candidate. Candidates, as a reminder, you'll have 2 minutes each to present your closing statements. And we'll go in reverse order from your opening statements. So candidate 4.
Again, I'm Angela Justice Schweller. I thank you guys so much for coming out here today. I'm running just as a regular Kansan, a working mom trying to raise her family here and wanting best for our state. I love the state of Kansas, and I want to see a good future for it. I represent families here every day that want to move here or are already living here, and I see what's important to them. It's the values in our public education. It's the parks. It's the good infrastructure. It's the safety. And that's what draws people here. It makes people want to live here, and it also brings businesses to the area, because they want to represent, or they want to set up their employees with a good foundation and place to live. So we need to take those things to Topeka, somebody that can get along, that can work hard, and represent all of the people around here in Johnson County, and someone that's going to listen and represent the people based on what they're saying. Thank you so much, Angela Justice Schweller, and you can find me at angelaforkansas.com as well.
Candidate 3.
I'm running because I want to run. I retired, and I could be just sitting at relaxing, enjoying the, quote, good life. But I'm a lifelong Kansan. I like this state. I want to see it grow and prosper. I want to be a part of that prosperity, and that's why I decided I wanted to run. There's a lot of things we can be doing, we should be doing. We've got to be looking forward, not backwards. We've got to be technically savvy, we've got to be vocationally savvy, we've got to use the resources we have, our central location, our low cost of living. All these things can work in our favor. We keep our education system up to high standards that we have, we'll be fine. And I want to be a part of that. I want to be in Topeka, and I want to work with all parts of the legislature, the far left, the far right, the center, to make those things happen. So I'm looking forward to being your representative. Thank you.
Candidate 2.
Kansas is a state of conservative values. Those values of individual freedoms and personal responsibility are woven into the fabric of who we are, and they mean something. But we're also a state of progress. We all know the meaning of ad astra per aspera. Kansas was the gateway of the westward expansion in the 1800s, and it's that pioneer spirit of progress that should remind us that while it's very important to hold true to our conservative values, standing on principle is not a justification for simply standing. We have to make progress. Conservatism should be a guiding principle that shapes our progress, but not a barrier that impedes it. We can still be uniquely Kansas, conservative and hardworking, but let's be the best version of Kansas that we can be. I'm Aaron Young. I'm a Republican candidate for House District 14, and I'm asking for your vote on August 7th. Thank you.
Candidate 1.
Once again, thank you to the Olathe and Lenexa Chambers for providing this opportunity for you to learn about the candidates and where they stand on the issues that matter to you. I want to see this district continue to thrive economically, to be a place that young families want to move to, where longtime citizens can afford to stay. I believe government should play a limited role in your life, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, doing what's essential, but without eating into more and more of your budget. I will strive to be a voice for the taxpayers in Topeka ensuring our state government spends your money as wisely as you would if you were there in person. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to be involved citizens by being here today, by listening online. You can learn more about me and find contact information for me at charlotteesau.com. You can find me on Facebook at Charlotte for Kansas. And please remember to vote on Election Day.
That concludes our forum for House District 14. Let's thank our candidates for participating in today's program. On behalf of the Olathe and Lenexa Chambers of Commerce, thanks to all of you for coming today and taking advantage of this important opportunity to learn about the candidates. For more information about candidates, videos of these and other candidate forums, and advanced voting details, please visit www.votejoco.com, and please share this voter resource with your colleagues, family, and friends. With that, thank you again for attending. That concludes today's event.